But this is linen, and Scripture tells us when we were just reading the passage in Luke, the Christmas story in Luke, especially in verse 12, Luke chapter 2, verse 12 says, "And this will be a sign to you," as the angels are talking to the shepherds, "this will be a sign to you. You will find the baby wrapped in swaddling cloths, lying in a manger." Now, if you were here last Christmas Eve service, you may remember this. Even if you were here, you may not remember this. But we talked about the significance of the shepherds. And so we know, and we've been told our whole life, the Christmas story, that shepherds were the humblest method of telling that the baby, the Christ, was here. But what you may not remember, is what we shared last year, was that the shepherds in Bethlehem's job, Bethlehem was the city where the sheep were raised that were to be used for the sacrificial system in Jerusalem. So the shepherd's job wasn't just to lead the sheep, but the shepherd's job was to care for the sheep and make sure that the lamb that was presented for the sacrifice was flawless. And so what they would do is they would take these cloths here, and this wasn't just a random thing. In Bethlehem, the swaddling cloths had a very specific use for them. And so since the town was known for raising the lambs that were used for the sacrifice in the temple, when a lamb was born, the shepherds would immediately wrap this cloth tightly around the lamb. Why? To keep the lamb from injuring itself. Because any blemish, the lamb was not worthy of the sacrifice, was not worthy of the sacrificial system. And so a bruised or a broken lamb could not be offered to God. It was not the purest of pure. And so these cloths were used to protect the lamb destined for sacrifice. That's the first image that the shepherds see when they arrive at the manger, in the cave. It wasn't a barn, it was a cave. The caves that you would find caves throughout the traveling route for weary travelers, and families would travel together, by the way. And they weren't able to just be airlifted out of these remote places to Baptist Hospital or University Medical Center if somebody got sick or injured or whatever. Somebody got sick or injured on these trips, the chances of survival was slim to none. So that's why these caves were all around, and in these caves you would find cloths. And so this is big compared to some of them, but most of them were wrapped really tight, about 5 inches wide, and they were wrapped and wrapped and wrapped so that if someone died along the route, they were able to go ahead and wrap the body and prepare it for burial. And so these cloths, they were used to protect these lambs, and that's the first image that the shepherds see when they arrive. Not a baby, but a baby that is wrapped the way a sacrificial lamb was supposed to be wrapped. And so Luke is telling us from the first few moments of Jesus' life why he came. So don't read the Christmas story and think, oh, how beautiful, he was wrapped in swaddling clothes. He was wrapped in clothes for an animal that was about to die. That's why he came. So the imagery here, you see it, it's powerful and testifying and not really beautiful. And the second image that we see here is the shepherds, they understood the sign. The angels didn't send the shepherds just anywhere. They sent them to a sign that they would recognize. The shepherds were the ones who examined the lambs. They knew what acceptable looked like. And so God entrusted the announcement of His Son, Jesus Christ, to the very men who spent their entire lives determining whether a sacrifice was worthy. And so when they saw Jesus wrapped in these cloths, they knew exactly what it meant. Before the priest ever examined Jesus, before a cross was ever raised, heaven declared him spotless. And the third thing that we could see here with these swaddling cloths, they also pointed forward to a burial. Those same cloths also served another purpose. As I said, in that culture, they would also wrap their dead in these cloths. These burial cloths were often stored in these caves. As I said, travelers would stay in on their journeys. And Jesus was born in one of these caves, and it says because there was no room for him in the inn. There was no room for them in the inn, and even if there was, they may not have let them stay in there because of the Jewish purity laws and Mary being pregnant. So a pregnant woman giving birth in an inn where other Jewish people were would have defiled everyone, and they would have had to spend 7 days purifying themselves before they could even go to the temple and offer a sacrifice. You see how God is already working all of this out. And so Jesus was born in one of these caves. On the night of his birth, Jesus is wrapped not only like a sacrificial lamb, but like a body prepared for burial. That's not accidental, folks. His life is already pointing toward his death, just a few verses in to the proclamation of his birth. The manger already whispers about the tomb. The cloths that cradle him at birth, these are going to reappear when his body is laid into the grave when he dies on the cross. Christmas does not make sense without Good Friday. It doesn't. And so God tells the whole gospel right here in these few verses of the Christmas story. God tells the whole gospel before Jesus even speaks one word in his ministry. Before Jesus heals anyone, before he preaches a sermon, before he performs a miracle, God tells the story. Wrapped like a lamb, laid where animals feed, born where sacrifices are prepared, this child did not come merely to inspire us. He came to replace us. He came to live the life that we could not live and die the death that we deserve. It's you that should be wrapped in this. It's me that should be wrapped in these. But Jesus, in the proclamation of his birth, came to live the life that you couldn't and die a death that you deserved. The gospel is not something that Jesus figured out later on. It was woven into his life from the very beginning. And so swaddling cloths like this, they remind us that Jesus didn't arrive by accident or improvisation. No, he came on purpose. He came wrapped on purpose for you, for me. This Christmas, folks, don't just marvel that God became man. Marvel that from his first breath, he was already moving forward to the cross for us.